Hello, folks. Welcome back to Reality Check with Arvind Swaminathan. I hope you didn't get too much of a shock with the previous one, though it came as a shock to me when I realized it. Now, if you follow up on that, what has happened in the last 3 or 4 days? The crackdown on the Popular Front of India, or the PFI. Now, when they started going into all this, you realize how deeply entrenched they are, even at the district level in many areas. Why? You remember what I said, the Islamization of India? And this is what they seem to be doing. They're so widely spread, it's almost impossible to get away from them. It's almost as if you look, you trip, you fall over, there's 2 or 3 of them under you. Now, why is it that Muslims can't allow anybody else to survive? I mean, this is a repetition of what happened in Iran centuries ago. They let a Parsi country, which let in a few Muslims. Within 30 years, there were no Parsis left in Iran. It was totally Muslim. And what are they doing here? Every possible way of disrupting everything in India, whether it's demonstrations, whether it's stopping people from working, whether it's stopping people from doing anything at all, whether it's pointing the finger and abusing Hindus or Hinduism. I mean, I don't understand what is going on behind their minds or in their minds, or do they have a mind? I mean, isn't there something called tolerance? And they say that Hindus are intolerant. Who said so? If they were intolerant, they would have told every Muslim to get out and go to Pakistan or somewhere else. There are 57 other countries which are Islamic. Why don't they go there? But this crackdown on PFI, you think of how much it took to crack down in 60 or 70 or 80 different places across 8, 10, 15 different states at the same time. You see the amount of planning that went into it, but even before that, the amount of investigation, the amount of follow-up, just to find out not just where they were, but also who was financing them, where the money trail came and where it ended. You see, it's all very well to ask, what were they doing for so long? Do you know how long it takes just to find one lead and trace it right down to a grassroots? Money that comes in from abroad may have gone through 15 or 20 shell companies. Try tracing that. When it comes into India, 20, 30 more shell companies before it gets to PFI. From there, it goes through another 10 or 15 shell companies before it gets down to the district level. Now you think of the amount of investigation that's necessary just to get one, let alone so many different leads or the whole picture, the whole web of what they've been up to. I hope you'll understand that it was necessary, and it's even more necessary to keep an even closer eye on them from now on, and any offshoots that may come up again. I mean, we don't want a repeat of what's happened before. Years ago, I think it was the UPA government that banned Simi. That turned into PFI. Now we don't want something else coming up at the end of PFI. So they say, oh, no, we're not PFI. As long as they're not doing the same thing, we're okay. But if they're doing this, should they be allowed here? Now what beats me is the sort of stupid logic of most of these opposition parties, including people like Mr. Owaisi and of course Rahul Gandhi, he beggars belief. I mean, why is it that because the PFI is banned, the RSS should also be banned? I mean, you're trying to tell us just because 200 Muslims in one particular group have been caught doing something very stupid, somebody else who's innocent must be hauled up just to equalize it? This isn't secularism. This is called stupidity. If a person or a group are guilty and you have the evidence, throw the book at them. But you don't throw it at people who have done nothing, especially not against the state, not against the nation, nor against any other religion. Unlike PFI, I mean, all the agitations all over the south, whether it's Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and in some cases even Maharashtra, even in places like Delhi and UP and Hyderabad, you'll find the PFI behind it. Even perhaps in Assam. Now to equate the two together, I just cannot understand how anybody can even think of doing something like that. And if they do, should they be called leaders? And do they have a place in our society? Anyway, let's go a little deeper into all this. Let's see the main political parties that have been ruling and governing this country. The main one has been the Congress since 1947. And what they've been doing, when you sit back and look at what they've been doing, one wonders, what have all of us been doing for so long that we've actually been voting them back into power, back into office, to go on repeating the same thing time and time and time again? Are we that fast asleep? Or are we that non-thinking or unthinking people that we're incapable of figuring it all out? I mean, what is wrong with this country of ours? Don't you think it's about time all of us woke up? Now you see, the first 17 years, 47 to 64, was Nehru. How he became Prime Minister, we all know. It wasn't democratic, because all the provincial Congress parties, they all said, out of the 15, 12 voted for Sardar Patel, 2 for Sitaramaiah, and 1 for Kriplani. Not one of them wanted Nehru as Prime Minister. They realized he was unfit for that position. Why? Very simple. Nehru spent much of his life disrupting everything. He was good at that. Now do you expect him to turn his mind over totally and start developing something? Like a fresh country which had no industry at all. Whatever industry there was in India had been destroyed by the British. Now, the result, of course, was there for all to see. This man had no idea. And no idea means precisely that. He blundered in every possible way. You've heard of the Midas touch, everything turning to gold. Well, this man, anything he touched turned to dust. He had only one thing in his mind. He was rabidly anti-Hindu. I know you may say anything you like, but you see the policies and the things he put forward. And most of us don't even realize it. Because a lot of it was done so surreptitiously and quietly, without any publicity, nobody got to know. In the same way as the Waqf Board Act of 1995. Nobody knew about it. And nobody knew, because there is no publicity, no hue and cry, nobody to take it up, and nobody bothered to look into it. Now, Nehru did not care about secularism, except for mouthing it. He did not care about democracy or democratic processes. And 3, There was no such thing as equality as far as he was concerned. He was a dictator, and he made no bones about it. He did not brook any opposition to anything he wanted done. And in his day, there was no opposition. I mean, who was there in the opposition during those times? Nobody. What did he do? Here's a list of some of the things he came out with. We're still paying for those policies. 1948. When the Indian Army had started clearing out all your Pakistani raiders and tribals and rangers from Jammu and Kashmir, he declared a ceasefire and took it to UN, having been warned by Mountbatten that if he went to UN, it would stay there for 50 years, nothing would happen. Well, it's still in UN, and we still have that embarrassment. Why? Because he had to interfere everywhere, in every wrong way possible. 1950, he comes out with Article 30 and 30A. Now, in 1947, he had shown this to Sardar Patel, and the answer he got from Sardar Patel made him retract very quickly, because Sardar Patel had told him, if you put this in the Constitution, I will resign from the Congress party and every Congress position, and I will fight it in Parliament, I'll fight it in the law courts, I will fight it on the streets if necessary. Unfortunately, before 1950, Sardar Patel was no more. So in 1950, Nehru puts it into the Constitution. And what are these? That you can teach Islam and Christianity anywhere. All funds donated to these bodies, Christian or Muslim bodies, stay with them, the government doesn't touch it. 30A, Hinduism, you cannot teach it anywhere. It is forbidden. Why? What was he trying to do by that? Was he trying to wipe out any trace of Hinduism in India? Why? What did he have against Hindus? You couldn't teach Hinduism? All donations to Hindu temples or temple trusts remained either under government control or it was taxed along the same lines as income tax. Then, 1954, he destroyed the administrative network or system. How? I won't go into it in detail here, but there's a man called S.A. Venkatraman, an honest ICS officer, who gave honest opinion fearlessly, which of course Nehru hated. That man at that time was Secretary for Commerce, and he put on one of Nehru's pet projects, this is not in the best interest of this country. The result was 6 or 7 CBI inquiries against him. They convicted him of corruption, not because there was any evidence, but because he couldn't find 2 receipts. Yes, 2 receipts, 1 bottle of whiskey and 1 bag of tamarind. The net result was that in 1954, when the final appeal and everything was done and dusted, this man was out of the service. But what did he do to the rest of the administrative services? He sent a clear message, you're not there to do an honest job, you're there to do what I tell you. When I want you to think, I will tell you what to think. That was his message. That was the end of the administrative services, any integrity or any thought. From then on, people took seriously what they were taught in Missouri. Don't think, find somebody, put your name on his work. 1954 was another year. He offered Zhou Enlai, the Chinese Prime Minister, equality. He came with open arms. Hind Chin, bye bye. We're great friends and so on. Now something else happened in 1956. Nehru brought out his Hindu Civil Code. Why? Why not Indian Civil Code? because it was designed to suppress and curtail Hindus only. It didn't apply to anybody else, only Hindus. 1956 was another place, another year where something momentous took place. The non-aligned conference in Bandung, and Nehru came out with his great so-called, well, he thought he was great orator and so on. The famous younger brother speech. The world applauded, what a great orator and so on. But one man, namely the Chinese Prime Minister, Zhou Enlai, he was livid. Why? You see, without realizing it, Nehru had hurled the worst possible insult at him. In old China, it is said, better to be born anything, a beggar, a dog, anything, but don't ever be born younger brother. That was the insult to beat all insults. Now I can understand that because I've been in such a position myself. I was in Canada at the time, about 1967. Now I used to do a lot of sketching and I went into this shop, small town. I got a pad and pencils and this lady comes up, big smile on her face and says, "May I help you, sir? What would you like?" I said, "I'm looking for a rubber." Well, the smile changed into a snarl. And I was frightened that she might have me thrown out through the door while it was still shut. Later somebody explained to me that, look, she did you a favor by telling you that what you wanted was an eraser. You know what you'd asked her for? I said, no. He said, you'd asked her for a condom. Who? I thought we were both speaking English. So again, the importance of understanding whichever language you're speaking in. What do you say? What does the other person understand? You must understand both these. It's not just you, but the other person also. What does he perceive? What are you trying to tell him? But Nehru had no inkling. He was shocked when the Chinese in 1962 sort of attacked without warning. So-called. The signs were there. He was just too stupid to understand them. He just did not want to know. Now, you've got to understand, Nehru was no statesman, he had no idea, nothing. I mean, he gave Tibet away to China, as if he had owned it and said, yes, it's okay, you go there, say, it's no problem. Why? Now Akshay Chen, he said, not a blade of grass grows there. So what? It's still our territory. In a desert, all you have is sand. But you still protect it because it's your territory. Even an animal understands that. He patrols his territory and he makes sure nothing else comes in. If he does, either he gets driven out or he gets rolled over. Now you can't understand basics like this and you call yourself a great leader. I mean, this shock is probably what killed him. And he died in 1964. One wonders what might have happened if he had died a little earlier. Because his successor was perhaps the best that India has had until 2014, Lal Bahadur Shastri. Now he was only around for 2.5 years. But what did he do? First, Nehru neglected agriculture totally. In fact, when somebody had asked Nehru, where are your food reserves? He said, Kansas. In the same way as when one of the British generals had asked him in 1947, what should we do? What about the armed forces? What should we do? I mean, what are our needs? He said, how do I get free from the armed services? He said, who's going to protect your borders? He said, the police force. It's not the job of the police force to sit on the borders. I mean, the man had no idea, and yet he was leading the country? Into what? Right? Now, Article 30 in the Hindu Civil Code, we're still paying for it. He also began or brought in 1954 Article 370 and 35A, Jammu and Kashmir. That was a totally different country now. Now, something else, I don't understand how he did it or why he did it. But once the Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir had signed that instrument of accession to the Union of India, from that moment on, he ensured that Hari Singh had no power whatsoever. And Nehru put all faith and power in Sheikh Abdullah, who was another odd entity, who believed that all Hindus in the valley were fifth columnists and they had to be removed. And he trained his son in the same mold. We all know what happened in 89-90, again in 1996, 2001 and 2003. I've already talked about most of these in another video, the Kashmir Files. Now, quite apart from all this, what was his net contribution? It was a negative quantity. His industrial policy was pretty useless. Add to all that, what else did he do? Nothing. He just spent a lot of time dancing around, wandering around all over the world and making sure that most people thought that India were a bunch of idiots. And I know, believe me, I felt that when I was in the UK in the late 50s and early to mid 60s. I was literally looked down upon as, something to be tolerated, that's it. I don't know where he got this impression that he was a great guy. He wasn't. The other thing that Nehru did, which we're still paying for, is license Raj. Whatever you did, you want to start up anything, you must have a license. And the license rules are very rigid. If you produce more than your license capacity, you were penalized heavily. You could even have been shut down or taken over. This was like the British. And in hindsight, what you can see is, all he did was what the British were doing, he reinforced that. As if the British had gone, but he had taken over from them. He was the new British ruler. I think that's what he thought of himself. But Mr. Shastri, when he came on, after Nehru's death, he paid a great deal more attention to the armed forces. He gave a great deal of credit to farmers, and he gave them a lot of encouragement. Because that was around the time when we had 2 severe seasons of drought, and we were in serious trouble. There were no reserves because Nehru had said they're in Kansas. 1965 war with Pakistan. Boy, did the Pakistanis learn. We know to push over. They seem to understand that, look, you come up against India, you got a big problem. Because not only do they have a certain amount of equipment to match anything we have, but they're also willing to fight. I know we believe that a Muslim army has never lost to a Hindu army. But boy, did they find out. And a little later, 1971, they found out in no uncertain manner. However, now, Lal Bahadur Shastri had one other big thing in his favor. We all think that Operation Flood or the White Revolution was Korean. It wasn't. And Korean himself has admitted this time and time again. The man who is responsible for it is Lal Bahadur Shastri. He was the one who went to Amul, he went to Anand, spent a night at a village, talked to farmers, milk producers and so on, came back next day and said, look, the buffaloes in Punjab and UP are far better than the ones you have here. They give much more milk. And yet why is it that Amul is so successful and all those producers are still gasping for money? They're still always in trouble. That's where he began to learn the value of integrated production. The whole system, milk production, collection, processing, manufacture of products, marketing, were all done as one unit. That was the reason for Amul's success. That's when the idea of the National Dairy Development was born. He set up the National Dairy Development Board and asked Kurian to look after it and take it forward and to repeat or replicate the Amul pattern in 170 or 180 districts. Now, the problem is that at Amul, the man who did all the thinking from start to finish was a man called T.K. Patel or Tribhuvan Das Kaka. When he told Kurian, do this, and Kurian did, everything was fine. Unfortunately, here there was no T.K. Patel. And Kurian, when he came to thinking about what needs to be done, was an absolute zero. The result you can see today, milk prices and product prices are so high in India that we can't compete with any other foreign company. In fact, probably 80% of the people of this country can't afford milk. It's just too high priced. Now, quite apart from all this, what happened to Shastri? Yes, he went to Tashkent, he died there. Why or how? Still a mystery, still something for conjecture. But the point is, once he had gone, Indira Gandhi came on. She took over, a bit of funny stuff, but the difference is that Nehru only wanted chamchas around him, people who were yes men, yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir. And he found them in people like Krishna Menon, Defence Minister, B.M. Kaul, GOC&C of the Armed Forces. A man from the Army Supply Corps with no military experience, no combat experience, is suddenly told to look after the whole army. What do you expect? You saw 1962. People from the plains with a cotton shawl and tennis shoes were sent up to places like Nathula and the passes about 16,000 feet high. So many of our casualties, what caused it? They just froze to death. They suffered frostbite because our defense forces were totally ill-equipped. In fact, generally you could almost say they had no equipment. The old 303 rifle made of wood against the Chinese who had automatic weapons. It was a no contest. Fortunately, by the time Shastri came along and then Indira Gandhi, we had a better bunch of officers. And the man in charge later became Field Marshal Manekshaw. I mean, he was a soldier's man, not a politician's man. In fact, in 1971, when Indira Gandhi called him in during a cabinet meeting and said, look, are you ready? He said, for what? Because the way things are going, it could be war. He said, yes, I know it could be. Now, are you ready for war? And he said, yes, I'm ready, but if we go to war now, he could guarantee 100% a thundering defeat. He said, what do you mean? He said, look, we're into April, next month the monsoon breaks in Bangladesh, what is now Bangladesh, we'd be stuck in quicksand. The northern pass is open, the Chinese can, well, we don't know what they can and will do. If Pakistan attacks on the western front, we'll be fighting on 3 fronts. We just don't have what it takes right now. But we have to wait and keep stalling. Wait until winter comes. Why? The northern passes will be closed. The Chinese threat is neutralized to quite some extent. That leaves just Bangladesh, what is now Bangladesh or East Pakistan as it was then, and the western front. Be prepared on the western front. Yes, we have to stockpile, we have to get our troops, our ammunition and guns in position, get everything ready. So that if there is any hint of an attack, we can hit and hit hard. Which is what happened. Because Pakistan attacked in December, I think December 3rd. But the strange thing is, just before, a day or two before, on the eastern seaboard, a submarine was sunk, which turned out to be, I think, Ghazni, which was the only submarine that Pakistan had, which was sunk just outside Vizag harbour. It was there looking for our aircraft carrier, which would have been patrolling Bangladesh, the Bay of Bengal, to ensure a blockade there. Which meant that they were going to attack the same way as Pearl Harbor, a surprise attack. It happened, the rest is history. Now all this because Indira Gandhi had some very capable ministers and a very capable commander-in-chief, which Nehru never had, because he never encouraged it. If Nehru had said, "Are you ready for war? Let's go," he would have said, "Yes, sir," immediately. And you know what could have happened? Disaster. But here was a man who stood up and said, "Look, this is not the right time for a war." Which is the sort of thing you need. If there's something bugging you, if there's something on your mind, look, this is not the right time, say it. And get it across forcefully. Nehru never did that, never allowed it. Now, Indira Gandhi didn't like it at the time, but she also realized, yes, he has a point. Now, whatever else she may have done in her time, Indira Gandhi ruined it. How? Well, the emergency. It destroyed all the goodwill that she had earned prior to that. 1976 that finished. 1977, the general election, she lost the election. And I think it was the Janata Party that came into power with Morarji Desai. But you know again what happens when you get a coalition, a bunch of partners in a coalition that form a government, there is infighting. That government collapsed. And for some reason he called for a general election. Why? There was no need for that. All he need have said was, look, this is our party, we'll have a majority. You don't want me, choose one from the remaining people. Now if they had made, remember Jagjivan Ram was one of Indira Gandhi's very important ministers who had been alienated and he joined the Janata Party. He was now with Morarji Desai, that lot. Now if they had made him Prime Minister, the Congress Party may have been finished there and then. Because he was one of those people who was either very lucky or very able or maybe both. Whichever ministry he headed or came into, invariably came up trumps. Before 1970, he was a Minister of State, I think in the Finance Ministry. That was probably the only time when the budget nearly balanced. There was almost no deficit. 1970, he was Minister for Agriculture. We had the nearest thing to a perfect monsoon. No drought anywhere, no flooding most places and so on. It was a superb monsoon, beautiful year. 1971, he was Minister for Defence. You had Bangladesh. And still, he didn't get anywhere. He went over to the Janata Party. 2 years he was in the government, and then he disappeared. 79, Indira Gandhi came back. Then you had Khalistan and so on. And she was assassinated in 1984. But you see, another mistake she had made which alienated her from both the ministers and the administration. A big mistake. In 1971, we'd won a thundering victory against Pakistan. And then like Nehru, he gave it all back. She gave it all back to them. What she should have done was sit in Islamabad in the same way as the Americans are still in Germany and so on, and told them, look, from now on, we take care of your defense, disbanded the army, we take care of your defense and foreign policy, you take care of local development. That's it. Nobody could have said a word against that. And yet she gave it all back. All the land we'd occupied in what is now Pakistan was given back. POK is still with Pakistan. So what did we get out of it? Nothing. Why did our people fight? Well, the people who died, what for? When the whole administration, the ministers and the army were saying, let us finish the job. No, ceasefire. Same as Nehru. Ceasefire. Now, a ceasefire is something you normally go in for if you're hard up, you're being held perpetually. You don't call for a ceasefire when you're going forward, when you've got the enemy in disarray. That's when you go as far as possible, then consolidate. Neither Nehru nor Indira Gandhi understood this. The result you can see even today. Pakistan is back even stronger. Plus, they're into all this terrorism that's coming here. And from there, they're helping finance something like the PFI, among other people who are doing it. Now, once Indira Gandhi was gone, Rajiv Gandhi, her son, took over. Why? Was the Congress so bereft of anybody of decent, anybody of quality to lead? Now, he came in, he was all at sea. He brought in a whole new young bunch of people who lasted for about a year and a half. And then he had to go back to the old guard. And this lasted until 1989. During one of that election, the Congress party was wiped out in northern India. And during one of his election campaigns down near Chennai, he lost his life because he was blown up by one of these human bombs or suicide bomber. Congress did better in the south than they did up in the north as a result of a sympathy vote. But it was VP Singh and his coalition which took over the reins in Delhi. And they went on till about 1990, 91. That government finished. And then you had Narasimha Rao's government, which is also a coalition. You see, from 1989, 90 onwards, there was no single party rule. There was no party which had a simple majority in Lok Sabha. From then on until 2014, it remained coalition all the way. Whichever government came to power was a coalition until 2014. Now, 2014, the first NDA government came into power with Modi as Prime Minister, and Modi ji was the first single party which had a clear majority, which of course increased in 2019. But you understand how things have been going, and Narasimha Rao, in his ignorance or stupidity, he was intelligent in some ways and really stupid in others. He brought out the 1991 Places of Worship Act, again penalizing Hindus. But what he did in 1995, this Waqf Board Act, I mean, he gave the whole of his country, every piece of land in this country, to Muslims and the Waqf Board on a silver platter. And nobody knew about it until now, about 2022. When a farmer or a person living in a village in Tamil Nadu, in Trichy district, wanted to sell some land to raise money for his daughter's wedding. He found a buyer, accepted payment. When he went to register it in favor of the buyer, he was told you can't. You have to get an NOC from the Waqf Board because it's their land. How come? What happened? When did that happen? Here are all my ownership papers. How come they own it? Then they found that 6 villages had been taken over, including a temple which is 1500 years old. How is this, bhai? Very strange. Every one of them have papers to prove their ownership, and yet it belongs to the Waqf Board. So you see, the Congress governments, certainly until Rajiv Gandhi, what did they consist of? Basically people who had no idea, like Nehru, Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi. They had no experience in leadership. Not one of them had ever been a minister before they became Prime Minister. What did you expect from them? I mean, you must have some experience somewhere as a Minister of State, a junior minister, or a minister or a cabinet rank. Something you must have. Nothing. And this is where your dynasty started. Nehru, Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi. And then the UPA government, you're back to Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi. Now Rahul Gandhi in 10 years never accepted the responsibility of even a Minister of State or a Deputy Minister. And yet he likes to project himself as the next Prime Minister. I mean, one needs a little common sense. And what he's just shown with this PFI. PFI is banned, so he says RSS must also be banned. Why? RSS has not done anything against the state. So why should it be banned? Where is the logic? And what sort of logic is this? Just because one is a Muslim organization and the other is a Hindu organization, you've got to balance the two. That's not secularism. That's called stupidity. I mean, the law is not there to be abused or misused. It is there to be used. The Congress party has never understood this. It's always been, from Nehru on, dynastic politics. Indira Gandhi in the 70s de-recognized all the princes in all states. What was the result? The old Maharajas went. They were replaced by political Maharajas. So again, now the politician is supreme. Now we begin to understand what ails the Congress party. It has no stalwarts, no experience. It does not want to get experience. When they have the opportunity, they shirk accepting that responsibility, and yet they want to be Prime Minister. I mean, Rahul Gandhi wants to be Prime Minister because his father was, his grandmother was, and his great-grandfather was. Therefore, he must also be what? So what's the difference between the Maharajas who are de-recognized and this family? Yes, the BJP also has plenty of people whose fathers and grandfathers were also politicians, but not to the extent that one takes over from the other. Yes, if he earns it, he does. If he doesn't, somebody else comes in, which is what it should be. Well, folks, it begins to. I hope I've begun to give you some idea what's wrong with the Congress party. It's a party that doesn't seem to know what to do, and yet it wants to do it. Logically, at least to me, you must know what you want to do or what needs to be done before you set about doing it. But if you don't know what needs to be done, how do you do it? How do you treat a problem or a disease when you don't know what it is, when there's no diagnosis? You remember I've said in one of my earlier videos, proper diagnosis is what is necessary for a proper course of treatment. You can't treat unless you know what the problem is. And that seems to be the problem with the Congress party. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please, if you do, like it, subscribe, pass it on to your groups, your friends, your relatives, ask them to pass it on. And see you next time.